So I would like to introduce to you, and hold your applause until I introduce them all. You have probably a good sense of who some of them are. Mike Magidson is the director and co-writer, and he's right there. All right. If you break into applause, that's okay. To my left here is Mike Gunson. Mike is the manager of Global Change and Energy, the Global Change and Energy Program.
Correct.
Got it. At the NASA-JPL laboratory at Caltech, and he's also the project scientist on the Orbiting Carbon Observatory. So we've got someone who really understands climate change, and we're very glad to have you. And Anne Andreasen is the co-producer of the film. She also runs the children's home in Inuk that we saw in the film, and she is also, I saw in the credits, production designer, location manager, and all those other things. So I was an executive at Disney for a number of years, and a production executive in features. And one of the things that I was drilled into my head was never make a movie with animals, children, or water. So what possessed you, and how did you do it?
Craziness. No, well, the unserious answer to that is that I figured that if I had a film, if I was making my first feature in a language that I didn't understand with children on the ice at minus 30 to 40 degrees Celsius, I would have every excuse in the world if the film was a failure. But the more serious answer is that I had made 2 documentaries with Anne up in Inuk, which is about 500 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, and I didn't feel like we had gotten to the end of the story with those 2 documentaries. Greenland is going through some tremendous transitions right now due to climate change, as well as with the modernization that we all know about. And so I felt that to go more into a narrative form, still using some of my documentary know-how, I would do justice, at least a little bit of more justice to the story.
And could you tell us some about those changes that Greenland is going through, especially in the north?
Yeah, things go very fast, and of course it's always the weakest people who have to pay the price, and it's not only the economic changing and it's climate changing too, because when you are a very vulnerable person, you don't say that you need help, so it's always the weakest one who is paying the price, and the same with climate change too.
How do you see that? The film was made some years ago. Since then, I read somewhere that there is even less ice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scientists can respond to that a little better than I can, but I can just respond through my own eyes and what I've experienced. As I said, I've made 2 documentaries there as well. So I started working up there in 1999, 2000, and since that period, which is 12, 13 years, the amount of ice during the ice season in Inuk has significantly been reduced. When I first went up there, we would start working in February. There would be real solid ice. Now, sometimes in March, sometimes there's no ice. The hunters explained to me that there used to be a good 6 months of solid ice where they could go out and hunt and basically do what they've been doing for thousands of years to survive. And now they're down to sometimes 6 weeks.
So, Mike, would you explain to us what's going on, what we're seeing?
It's a bit of a convoluted story, but about 50-odd years ago, when modern climate science took off, everybody recognized that the place which would be most sensitive, where we'd see the quickest change, was going to be in the Arctic. There are a number of different reasons, but you have an ocean, the Arctic Sea surrounded by land. There's lots of environmental, physical reasons why we expected that to be the most sensitive area. But what we're seeing now, I've been at JPL for more than 25 years, and we've been a number of different NASA sensors have monitored the ice cover in the Arctic Sea as well as on the Greenland ice sheets. And the most remarkable thing for anybody who's a climate change skeptic, is to look back at the record of measurements of the Arctic ice extent. It's one of the great signatures, in my humble opinion, of climate change, because now we're in a period where almost everybody knows that we expect the Northwest Passage to be free of ice. You can see that in the summertime, the sea ice extent is a remarkably minimum. And it will be in our lifetimes, if not in the next 5 to 10 years, where we'll probably see the whole of the Arctic Sea ice-free. The mechanisms by which that happens, it's not just the air's warmer, or it's a combination of different factors, but you can see it, there's no build-up from year to year of old ice. The old ice used to be a dominant feature of the Arctic ice around the northern parts of Greenland, North America, Baffin Island, etc. And we can see from satellite data that that's almost all gone. So every year the Arctic has to freeze over afresh, and then it goes away. So you have to form new ice every season now.
Can you take that to our lives? We saw we were amazingly intimate with people in the film to see how it affected their lives, but it's still possible to say, well, that's there and we're here.
With the Arctic being, by the way, I thought that was such a personal film. Can I just say wow again? Because, I spend my days looking at satellite data, and it's so impersonal. It really is so impersonal. But back to the point, we're not far from, a number of people have been looking at the impacts to us here in Southern California, and we live on the opposite extreme. We live in such an arid environment that's made only possible by the availability of frozen snow water that we live off the melt every year.
Huh.
And we're in a situation where there are a number of projections that in the next 20 years we will see changes in our access to that water. The amount, the variability in the amount that we get from year to year. And at the same time, we're backfilling. We're using groundwater, aquifers, fossil water that's been down there for, millennia. And we're overdrafting. We're just drafting away. So for us in California, living in the middle of a very arid, semi-arid environment, we all are going to see the impact on fresh available water, because we're going to lose the snow, we're going to lose the ice that we depend on.
Mike, one of the great symbols of the problem of climate change is the polar bear.
Wow.
Which in this film was treated in a surprising way. It was not the furry friend who is endangered, but rather embedded in the life of the people. It's a very different way of looking at that. What were your thoughts about that part of the script in the movie?
Me?
No, the other Mike.
Yeah, we're going to have a Mike
Sorry,
G and
yes.
Mike M.
Sorry.
Okay.
Mike M, yeah. Well, I mean, our major goal with this film was to tell their story, to help them tell their story, I should say. And not to, we just wanted to make it as authentic as possible. Jean-Michel Huquetin from France and I went, he was my co-writer. And so we weren't going to go, politically correct for Western audiences. We were telling their story. This is their story. And so treating polar bears in the Greenlandic sense was a no-brainer. That's what's happening. They're not off slaughtering polar bears. They've it's a subsistence society. It was, but we've sort of trampled on over that. But there are still hunters who are still hunting polar bears. There is a quota, obviously. They can't go out and kill great numbers, and there are only certain hunters who can hunt them. And those hunters are still the pride of the culture in which they live.
And we saw two different kinds of changes happening in the North. One had to do with climate change, and the other had to do with urban culture, the credit card life of the big city. Talk a little bit about both those forces as they have affected the children at the children's home.
Yes, one thing what's very important for the Greenlands is their own identity. And because all this modernity coming, they're losing their identity. And it's very important then to go back to the roots. And for example, that when you know your roots, I just want to show you, for example, when you have a tool, if you had to hunt something, you had to go backwards to get very fast forwards. So the kids are losing identity. If you don't give them a good, strong identity, they have creating a lot of problems, social problems, and it doesn't make it easier. For example, you're talking about climate change here, and I had to say that, for example, when we started to make this program with our kids, it was because we had dogs, and there's two of my social educators here. They used to make big dog sledging 5 weeks, and now it's impossible because we had 6,000 dogs in Umanak for 20 years ago, and now we have only half. And that's why we are very close to see what's happening to the society. And you're talking all the time about this climate change, but when we have climate change, it means we have cultural change. And that's very important, affecting the people in this. Even when you talk about California, will be changed. And I think in the future we will have an issue called water. We're going to fight against water. It's going to be the big issue of power in the world. It's going to be the water. And I say again, it's always the most weak people who had to pay the price for all kind of changing, even it's climate change or culture change. I don't know what more to say about it, but I think I have living 28 years, seeing how the ice is disappearing, and it's going faster and faster and faster every year. In 97, we could go for dog sledding for 5 weeks. In 97, and we've not been doing that yet because of the ice situation is very bad, and we don't have that much dogs anymore.
Just to add to the point about modernization, when I first went to Umanak to visit Anne in the children's home, one of the first things I noticed were the posters of Madonna and all the other icons of our culture on the doors and in the rooms of the children, and it just struck me at that point that they are identifying with the same things that I identify with, yet that they can't go to a concert to see Madonna. They can't. There's nothing really very concrete about it. And so I think that then when I went out on the ice with Anne and I saw these children put on the polar bear pants and the sealskin jackets, and suddenly the transformation of the children, just their faces, it was so remarkable that I suddenly understood what she had been telling me about how important this program was for her and her children, and the fact that it's not nostalgia, it's just reminding the children where they come from so that they can be proud of their past and better confront their future.
I had to add something because I remember that when all the people wearing this cloth outfit and the people asking, sitting down to ask her, how does it feel like to wear in your ancestors' clothing? And she said, what? That's what we have to wear today. If you have to survive Greenland, go on dog sled and use in the nature, you need to use the same as I did before, and you're doing that today. So we don't make this program for the kids to be hunters or to be old-fashioned, actually, to be modern.
This, Mike. You said something a moment ago which was startling, which is that in our lifetimes we will see the Arctic be water.
That's right. I think that I can't remember the numbers just off my top of my head, but there are numbers that they track in terms of millions of square miles that are covered in the Arctic by ice at the minimum point. But it's entirely possible that the rate of change we're seeing is quite remarkable, and it only has to continue at the rate it is every season, every summer season, for us to get to be ice-free within the next few years. Just a comment. I remember a certain Caltech professor talking about this many years ago. if you want to go look for climate change on a planet where water changes from ice to water vapor and clouds, you go look where the ice is. So you see all the signatures of climate change wherever you find ice. That's the bottom line. And the Arctic Sea is one of the great examples. Never mind the great land glaciers anywhere in the world are pretty much all retreating at a fantastic rate.
One of the things that screenwriters talk about is the risk of being preachy in talking about an issue like climate change. Was that something on your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm as an audience member, I don't like to be hammered over the head with preachiness. And so that was something that, I mean, we wanted to, when you do speak with hunters in Greenland, it's exactly what you see on screen. They talk about what they've heard on the radio or what they, what they're hearing as rumors, but I don't think any of them are more interested in, going that much deeper because they have had other things to do, like hunting. So I just wanted to treat it through their point of view. I didn't want to change that point of view to my point of view.
Before we do Q&A from everyone here, we do have one of the stars of the film who's going to join us up here. Rebekka Jørgensen, could you join us?
Up here?
Yes, up here. We're going to bring a chair for you.
If I can just say a comment, Rebekka, or as I call her, Rebi, was a pillar during the making of this film. I was working, all the children you see on screen live in the children's home, and they're all non-professionals, and Rebi was basically doing more than just acting. She was the go-between for me and Jean-Michel and the children, and it was, without her, we wouldn't be sitting in this room.
If I could ask Rebekka a question, what was it like for you as a professional actor working with people who were not professionals?
I'm just translating a little bit for her. Do you want to say that? We were living as we used to live. It was easy enough, she said, because it was like we're doing what they used to do, so it was easy, she said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And has the climate change been something you have been touched by in your life?
Yes, yes. How? What then? It's like in the movie, we are translating again. Can you see it? The scene again? When we go on dog station now, the ride is very small. Before it used to be several months. Now it's very short. And her house and her polar bear trousers have been laying on the basement for a long time now. Before there used to be dog sledging every year. And our dogs get more hungry because we don't have that much food anymore, because it's difficult to go out to get fish when there's no ice and there's no water. It's just between. It's too much months where it's between. Can you understand what I mean? Before you had ice and you had water, now you have between, and it's difficult to go out to get some food for the dogs.
So you heard on the soundtrack beautiful voices, and in a few minutes we are going to be fortunate enough to hear the real people who made some of those beautiful songs who are going to perform for us. It's going to be a great treat. But between now and then, I would love to invite you to ask questions. There are 2 people with microphones so that it can be saved for posterity. Do we have a question?
First of all, I want to thank you for coming here and letting us see this film. It's a real treat. I was actually born in Greenland and raised there as a child, but don't get to go back that often, so it was just wonderful to hear the language. But it's such a strange and wonderful conglomeration of people who worked on this film, people from all different kinds of backgrounds and nationalities. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit from a producing side on how you managed to pull the film together and where you got financing and how the film came together, because it's a little bit of a strange animal.
Do you want to try that?
Want me to answer that? I had to say that it sounds very strange when you're in America, because a lot of things is about money, and of course money makes the world go around. But I had to say this film is made by a heart, because as Mike told you, he'd make 2 documentaries first, and then he wanted to make this feature film, and we're talking about how we get this money. So I went to Paris, and we talked together. So I told him, Mike, we had the people, we had the language, we had the clothing, and clothing is very important, you can see in this film. And clothing is important in Greenland. We always had to bring people with us to take care of the clothing. And we had location, we have a lot of things already. So I told him we already have 50% of the budget, so you just get the rest.
And
70%, I didn't know how much I said.
And unlike I'm American, so but unlike America, in France, that's where I live. There is, and I'm not going to crash on. I'm not going to criticize Americans, but and the system. But I was able to convince just a few friends, 2 great DPs, great sound man, to come on board this adventure for very, very minimal fees and go up to Greenland. These guys have shot fiction and documentary. I knew they could handle it. And then I formed quite a few partnerships in France for the post-production and everything. So it was, like she said, it was a lot of hearts, people who liked the project, who got on board, not necessarily for some type of profit, but because they wanted to see this film made.
Other audience questions? There's a microphone that's going to come to you.
You have one right here. For the kids who went, this doesn't seem to be on. For the kids who went out onto the ice for a great duration, for a great portion of the film, were any of them out there essentially for the first time? Was this something that they had not previously experienced in their own lives? And if so, I think everyone can hear me. And if so, what was the essence of their experience that they managed to convey to you who worked on the film? And do you see any, or did they talk about any ways in which it made a profound difference in the way they thought about their own country and their own living experience?
You'll have to buy my documentaries to get the answer. I'm
No,
joking.
I doubt
I'm joking.
I had to say that every year we have this program with the kids to go on the ice, but of course every year there's new kids, and this time there were some new kids, first time experience. But it is a kind of culture when you go to this orphanage, is that we're using the nature a lot, and we have dogs and we go on dog sledging. But every time is first time for somebody, because you have to remember when kids come from broken homes, that they actually doesn't have so much their own culture with them. You have to start actually from the ground. Even with this kind of to wear national clothing and to wear, to feel, to have comics on your feet and to share the nature. I think you understand. A lot of broken kids from broken homes have problems to be out in the nature, and and see their own culture. So a lot of the new kids here, there was some new kids, because you saw some of the kids inside this movie. I tell you, we had all the village behind us, we had almost all Greenland behind us, and when we had to bring just 4 young people sitting behind there, we had to bring the other one, because they had to motivate the other one to go on the ice. They had to be friends with them. They didn't go out there alone. They need to bring their own friends, and that's the way they helped them to go through this movie. So there was a lot of other kids behind in this movie who helped the one who's acting.
And just to go on to what happens after, some of the children really do appreciate it to a point that, for example, one of the boys in my first documentary, Masa, I learned this year that he killed his first polar bear, which makes him a legend. I mean, seriously. And then others no, they end up, doing administrative jobs in this capital. But I think it does have I mean, I don't know, Anne knows better than I do, but I think it does have a profound effect on all of them in some form or another.
If you ask today, we have Jean-Michel, who was the writer of this screen. He's just making PhD now, and he's following up about 50 of the children who left the orphanage. And one of the best experience of these kids was the dog sledge ride. They have been on the nature, to score how the nature is, and they are not becoming hunters. They are becoming, as Mike said, they're going to be working other jobs. We don't create this program because they should be a hunter, but just to give them identity.
And I read somewhere that you talked about therapy on the ice as one of the programs, but therapy in film became a program.
Yeah, too.
Yeah, that was one of the major points of this film. Was I had worked with these children and with documentaries with Anne, and we said, hey, why don't we show these children that they can make a film too, a film that is worthy of being shown in places across the world. I believe in these kids, and I believe in the work that Anne's doing, and I figured that we could make it happen.
Well, I had to say that Rebekka, who's sitting beside me here, and Abby, who's somewhere, I don't know if she went out, but they used to take kids out from Uummannaq, all the way from Uummannaq to Qaanaaq, and it's a dog sledge that take 5 weeks, only one way. And Rebekka had been doing dog sledge to the Melville Bay 3 times, and I wish to do that one day. I hope still I will do it, because we're waiting for good ice. So Rebekka sitting here with Abby and other hunters here. They're the one who really is outside the ice for she's spending sometimes 3 months on the ice with the kids.
Mike Gunson, we could be depressed listening to you or watching that movie. So how can you talk us down from this ledge? What can we do?
Have you heard the story about the Irishman, the Englishman, and the Scotsman? Oh, not going there. Actually, that's a really serious complaint. Actually, is climate depression, and how do I talk myself out of it? I think we're adaptable. Contrary to what the folks in Washington are doing at the moment. I think there are some. I think we can do the right thing, and I think we can adapt. But I worry. I think Anne said it most. The worry is where people are right on the fringe, and they're the people who pay the price. But can we adapt? I believe you've got to be optimistic. I mean, I think there are things we will do, and we can get through this. But it's a new world we're going to be living in.
Another audience question? Yes, bring a mic. Thank you.
Thank you for an enormously powerful film. Is there any way that this film can be shown to the Neanderthal brains in Washington to effect a change?
We'll work on that.
When's he going on Netflix?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you want to take that? Or one hope is that the people in Washington and elsewhere around the country will not only see this film, but they will see the work that you all will bring onto the television screen and onto iPads and laptops and feature films. The hope is that this will inspire you to tell stories, the human stories, not abstract ones, in which the presence of climate change in our lives can be a theme. Right down there? Here comes a mic for you. We do that only because people who are watching the video won't hear your question.
Well, first of all, just to say, I mean, thank you all, an amazing film, and in addition to all the things you've talked about, visually stunning, and just the locations and the photography, really beautiful, and important for as many people to see as possible. Mike from JPL, just to follow up your incredibly depressing comment from before. I mean, even if we take the most radical action, can we ever return to the balance that we've had, or will we always have to settle, in the best of cases, for an enormously reduced ice? Or if we do things, I've seen this film Carbon Nation that talks about big stuff.
I'm just going to get my wife to get the car warmed up so I can make a run for it.
I mean, is it possible, assuming that we're all correct in understanding the degree to which humanity is responsible for this, is it possible to take enough action that this can be reversed to the point where there is a balance that we had, 50 years ago, or?
The simple answer is no. The rate at which carbon dioxide builds up in the atmosphere and remains there is measured in centuries. Carbon dioxide is tremendously inert. That's the bottom line. There are two ways you lose carbon dioxide out of the system. It either dissolves in the water. Everybody knows what a soda bottle's got in it. Or plants take it up, and in photosynthesis. But in balance of all of that, warm water lets carbon dioxide go back out, and plants and microbes and animals respire. So you put CO2 back in. So the bad news is, no, we're not going to see a return to conditions that have existed for millions of years, literally millions of years. The best, I'm sorry to be such a bad newsmonger, I know there's a lot of interesting work going on in geoengineering, etc., on trying to come up with solutions where we can re-engineer the Earth. My biggest worry about all of that is that the unintended consequences lead to a worse situation. And I had a terrific experience this summer, sorry to divert, in working with 4th through 6th grade teachers. And we talked about this one issue, having talked about climate change and how you bring education into 4th through 6th grade. And the teacher who was helping me lead that workshop, she said, Mike, the one thing I always tell people is you do one small thing every day. And she was big about beach litter. And she said, what I do is I always pick up one more piece of litter off the beach when I go for a walk. And that's the approach you have to take in your life. I think you can do one small thing every day. And it doesn't matter what it is, but just do one small thing. And it's about consumption. No matter how you turn it around, everything you get comes with a footprint, a carbon footprint. Every piece of food, everything. So if you can take one small step in reducing your carbon footprint, you'll help slow down the process.
Anne, did you want to say something?
Yes, because it's very nice we're talking about here, because if we had to do something, we had to start already in kindergarten and even tell the kids not, but that's nothing new. We should do it all the time. We care about how much water we use and how much soap and all these things. It's just normal, common education for our kids, and be more aware about what we do our children when they're small. I just wrote an article called People on Thin Ice, and we have a lot of scientists. There's so many people coming, and they're watching all the people living in the north through a microscope. They even know more about the people than people know about themselves. But we need to put all this knowledge out to the people, out down to the children, so they understand it. But this year, for example, you said about hope. There was one hunter said to me, Anne, look at the rainbow this year. It was big, and he hoped it's going to be cold next year. This was his wish for next year. When he saw this big rainbow, it means it's going to be colder weather. So we hope every year it will be colder, but we don't know. Because we can see, as you're talking about, the ice gets smaller and smaller, and the light goes through, and the plants are growing under the ice and eating the ice. And that's the problem. So every year we see, December, let's hope the ice will come, because when the ice comes, when it's dark, then it's easier, the ice will get thicker. But when the ice come in January, February, and there's too much light, then the plants is even eating the ice from under the ice. So we hope every year that it will be colder, but as you said, we don't know, but we wish to get more cold weather so we have more time for dog sledging and fishing on the ice and doing what they used to do, but we still hope it, but as you said.
In the press kit, there was an amazing set of statistics. I'm just going to read a few of them about the film. 1,000 kilometers of sea ice, 243 sled dogs, 74 pairs of mittens, 62 skin anoraks, 56 days, 41 non-professional Inuit actors, 13 seal hunters, 6 canvas tents, 4 different languages, 3 blizzards, and can I add, 1 applauding audience.